meeting of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Let's see. Actually, Dr. Ochoa, since you're standing, if you'd stay standing and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. And we are going to, I think we'll save acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence until after closed session. So, Council, would you let us know what we're going to be doing in closed session?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Chair and members of the board and public. Closed session items. 4A, conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9A D1. Keep Fort Ord Wild versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Monterey County Superior Court case number 17CV4540. That's a matter of pending litigation. And item 4B, conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9A D1, Marina Community Partners LLC versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, Monterey County Superior Court case number 18CV871, also pending litigation. Item 4C, conference with legal counsel, one item of potential litigation will come off the calendar, and we will not be considering that item in closed session today.
Thank you. With that, we will recess into closed session and return as soon as we can. Reconvene the January 11th, 2019 meeting of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. We're just returning from closed session. Council, would you announce any relevant action?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members of the board and public. The board did meet in closed session on item 4A, conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9A D1, Fort Ord Wild versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, Monterey County Superior Court case number 17CV4540, pending litigation. Heard from counsel about the procedural status of the case, and there's nothing to report out. 4B, conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9A D1, Marina Community Partners versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, Monterey County number 18CV871, also pending litigation. The board heard from counsel concerning the status of that case, and there's nothing to report out.
Thank you. We will move now to acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence. And I think our executive officer has an item or two.
An item or two, Chair, yes. Chair Parker and members of the board, just a couple of things. I think each of you should have at your seat an announcement about the February 2nd tour, if not, and then there's some outside for folks as well. That particular tour is all about the munitions and explosives, but it's also about Fort Ord. Bill, you want to add anything?
Yeah, the focus is on the groundwater program and the landfill.
As well, we've mentioned in the past, there will also be an impact area guided walking tour on May the 4th, and then on July 13th, another impact area bus tour. So there's a couple of items this year. A couple of things I wanted to highlight quickly. The Northeast Southwest Arterial Connector review process is currently underway. We're seeking input on the process, and it used to be known as Eastside Parkway. We try not to use that as the board's changed the name, but please check with our website if you have comments and notes. The Veterans Transition Center, I'm hoping all of you have received the new Veterans Transition Center news that comes out fairly regularly. Our colleagues in the city of Marina have moved ahead with the Veterans Transition Center housing program, and so they're anxious to get moving with that. And in addition to that, they are looking at doing some work as they volunteer for the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, and they're raising funds for the VTC through that process. Then a couple of other items. The DART program is going to have meetups starting in February 12th, and then that's leading to the drone camp, which will be in June, and a drone symposium. The Fort Ord Reuse Authority staff is working very closely with the City of Marina Airport staff, the California State University Monterey Bay staff, and University of California staff on putting together this drone camp with the University of California Agricultural Natural Reserve folks. It's going to be a week long with high school students coming in from all over the state, and then there will also be a symposium that will include them plus professionals in this new technology that's growing for all of us in the region about more jobs, more opportunities. I also wanted to mention that upcoming we'll have a town hall meeting. It looks like Supervisor Parker is going to be hosting this. Is that correct? It has 3 different hosts, and it's going to be Wednesday, January 16th, 5 to 7 p.m. It's going to be at the Community Foundation of Monterey County Community Meeting Room. That's on Garden Road in Monterey. And I want to, just a quick note, this is by way of not an announcement, but an acknowledgement. Several of you have asked about the impact of the government shutdown on what's happening at the former Fort Ord. There are 5 areas where we are experiencing some difficulties. One, I think that's important to note, is our colleagues at the Bureau of Land Management are not now working. That's shut down portions of, if not all of the National Monument. The restrooms are not being serviced, so that's an important point. Our colleagues at the Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. EPA, in San Francisco are not now reviewing our Environmental Services Cooperative Agreement documents. As a consequence, those are slowed. While that's going to impact some of our property transfers, that's going to also cost the United States Army more dollars because they pay for all of these delays. So that shutdown on one end is costing folks on the other end. Third, we happen to have a habitat conservation plan that is 99.9% ready, just waiting for the solicitor at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to complete their work. But they're not allowed to when they're on furlough. So that does not seem to be processing either. There are a couple of other things you may note, and a couple of you have asked if, in fact, what's going on with MilCon and the potential for future funding, if funds are taken from defense and used for what we call the wall delays. Apparently, Bill Collins mentioned this the other day, that there is a possibility those funds will be taken away, will further delay our cleanup. So please be advised. The wall delays are affecting us financially and in time. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. Any other FORA board members have announcements of upcoming events of interest? All right, thank you. Let's move to roll call, please.
Supervisor Parker, Supervisor Phillips, Supervisor Adams, Councilmember Clark. Councilmember O'Connell. Mayor Pro Tem Morton. Councilmember Hoffa. Mayor Oglesby. Councilmember Wizard. Mary Ann Carbone. Mayor Gunter. Councilmember Garfield. Councilmember Reimers. Here. Kathleen Lee. Nicole Hollingsworth. Erica Parker. Todd Muck. Dr. Diffenbaugh. Steve Matarazzo. Dr. Ochoa. Colonel Ford. Bill Collins. David Martin. Lisa Reiherner. Matt Zepperman. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there any board member that would like to pull any item for comment or question? Yes,
I'd like
Director
to
Adams.
pull 7B for questions.
B as in baby
B
boy.
as in boy.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Any member of the public wanting to pull anything from the consent agenda? All right. So is yours a question?
It's a question.
Okay, great. Why don't you go ahead and ask that question?
Yes, okay. It refers to the minutes of December 14th, and it's number 8, business item. I'm going from, two of us are going from memory. As you look at the, under 8B, the adopted transition plan resolution, 1, 2, and 3, totally remember that happening. I do not remember item 4 being part of the motion that we passed. I don't think it mirrors the staff report.
Okay, so shall we then, so one way to handle this would be to ask the staff to go back and look at the tape and bring those minutes back at the next meeting?
Yeah.
So if that's all right, what we'll do then is give that direction for 7B to bring back the December 14th meeting minutes.
That'd be great.
8B?
8B on the minutes.
Right.
Page 7 in the packet.
Right. Good. And then I would entertain a motion then to approve items 7A, C, D, E, F, G. Yes.
Pulling for the 14th of December.
Yes.
Because the motion's incorrect. The second vote on the next minutes would also therefore be incorrect.
Because
So
it's copied.
Before you move forward, you should be determining what was the first and second vote on. So I would suggest, I would move that both those minutes be removed from the consent agenda and returned at the next meeting.
Let's see. All right. Although in the minutes of the December 19th meeting, there isn't that same delineation of 1, 2, 3, 4. It's,
So how can you do a second vote on something? Well,
yeah.
it
So-
makes no sense to me. But go ahead.
All right. Well, we can be on the, yeah, exactly. So we'll just pull them both and have them both come back once we've determined what happened on the 14th in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Yes.
Question,
Director Phillips.
Council, do you see any negative impact of pulling the minutes?
I don't see anything negative.
All right. With that, then, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items 7A, D, E, F, G, H. Thank you. Motion by Adams, second by Gunter. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. We'll move now to new business items. First is the ESCA quarterly update.
Stan Cook will have a fairly brief PowerPoint presentation. We are actively engaged in working with the United States Army on a number of major items under the Environmental Services Cooperative Agreement, and also under the transition plan, we have some items that for the Environmental Services Cooperative Agreement as well.
Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me? Thank you, Michael. Are you finished? Okay, thank you. I wanted to point out one error, and that is on page 2 below the table in your board report. It says the draft final ESCA Group 1 and Group 4 rods are being signed, and once signed, all ESCA properties will have rods. Those have been signed. We have rods, records of decision on all ESCA properties. That was something was left in. On December 17th, let me go to my visual here. On December 16th, Michael and I flew to Washington, D.C. We spent the 17th with FORA Special Counsel, meeting with the Army BRAC headquarters in Washington, D.C., pointing out to them that there were certain items that had to be completed in the ESCA that would go past the AIG cost cap insurance policy expiration date. They agreed that the items that we brought to their attention were something that needed to be funded, and we targeted we identified the ESCA's Army contingency funding. There's a amount of about $15 million maximum that they would apply to that. So we flew back on the next day, January 18th, with a commitment that those items would be funded. Now we have to work with the grant administrator on what the actual costs they will fund for those items will be. So they're coming
Stan,
back.
you know that says January 16th, and when I flew, it was December 16th.
You know, this
and,
is
and I
time warp. That's funny. I worked on that and worked on that. And
I remember
saw
that because one of those days was my birthday.
Anyway, it's not in the future, it's in the past. So what is in the future is that the BRAC headquarters folks and the folks that administer the ESCA contract with us will come to Fort Ord. They'll do a walkthrough of the properties. They will look at we will walk through them, what tasks remain to be done, what we think the cost will be, and be able to tie that down with them. This was all before the government shutdown, and without EPA being able to finalize some of the documents that may be extended, and Michael explained that would be an additional cost to the Army. So that's coming up in February. In our fiscal impacts on this report, we note that the fiscal impact should be quite less than $1 million, so it will not get anywhere near impacting that $15 million of the Army contingency funding. So, but until we've actually sat down with the ESCA grant administrator, or not grant administrator, ESCA contract administrator, we will not know the amount that they will fund. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Yes. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you.
Director Adams.
Why are on page 27 under the post ESCA amendment the fund status? My report is blank.
That's because when we first, you must have downloaded that right away when it was available, because
I'm
first
so
day-
anxious to get the FORA binder. Of course we did.
what's that?
I said I'm always so anxious to read the FORA binder. Of course we did.
Well, that's great. What happened is we downloaded the draft version, which we don't put the numbers into, and then in the final packet, it was just an error. So the next day we found it and fixed it. I've got it right here. So anybody that suffered from that same problem,
Thank you.
it shows that this shows that the AIG policy has funded $5 million.
Stan, get closer to the mic.
That must be there's the laser. $5 million has been funded by AIG cost cap policy above the original funds that were given to us for the Environmental Services Cooperative Agreement. There were some additional items that were added last year to pay for some additional EPA and DTSC technical oversight. There were also some additional ESCA administrative funds for FORA. And there were some funds set aside for future MEC find assessments. If something's found on ESCA property, we can assess that. Then there's also some funding that was added last year to take care of long-term management and land use control management up into 2028. So this is the balance sheet, and that's what was missing from your packet. I'm sorry.
Is there anything outstanding that we should note?
No.
Thank you.
Everything's accounted for and paid for.
Neat and tidy. Anyone else on the board with questions for Mr. Cook? Any member of the public with a question or comment on this item? Seeing no one coming forward, I'll bring it back to the board. So basically, we're receiving this report, and in the process, we're authorizing the executive officer to complete negotiations and amend the ESCA agreement. You want to talk about that? What that entails?
Yes, so the board has already authorized me to negotiate. We will be having a visit by the USACE, United States Army Corps of Engineers, and BRAC, Base Realignment and Closure Office, February 20. At that time, we'll try to finalize some of the specifics about what would need to be amended into the contract. This is a reimbursement contract, essentially, from here on out, so the costs are what we agree to, but then those can be adjusted as the costs go up or down. The Army's been very flexible in working with us to make sure that all of those are paid for, because in essence, we are an agent of the United States Army in completing this remediation of munitions and explosives. So when BRAC Chief Tom Letterly and his crew are going to be here on February 20th, I want to be able to know, they need to know that I have the authorization to proceed with an amendment to the contract to increase the amount of reimbursement due to the delays.
Great. Any board members with questions on that? I would entertain a motion to authorize the executive officer to make those negotiations. All right. Thank
Second.
you. Motion by Carbone, seconded by Phillips. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes
Thank you.
unanimously. Thank you, Stan. Next item is notice of intent to terminate CalPERS contract.
Yes, Chair Parker, members of the board, this has often been referred to as the first action in the dissolution of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority and in the transition. So it's been listed in the transition resolution. We have to take this action now in order to be able to have an amount a year later from PERS that's an accurate amount that talks about what liabilities and what's left over. So it's in the form that they requested. It's fairly straightforward, very similar to what others in the past have done, although this doesn't happen that often.
Thank you. Any questions about this? Yes, Director Morton.
Yeah. This is a brand new law that the legislature adopted in January of 2019. The employer has to give the notice. CalPERS is required to provide the employer with all of the addresses that they have on file, and there's some time limits that they have to comply with. So employer has 30 days to give the full notice, but there are still lots of unanswered questions, I will tell you. They haven't promulgated regulations to even implement the new law. So like many things at Fort Ord, we are on the cutting edge.
So the intent to terminate simultaneously gets served on every.
The intent to terminate gets served on CalPERS and served on all the employees simultaneously.
Actually, it's not the resolution of intent that gets served on everybody. It's not quite like a court case. What happens is the copy of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority resolution is provided to CalPERS. That starts the process at their office. They then generate a list of the contact information that they have in their files, the most recent contact information. They have to provide it to the employer. Employer then turns around, takes that information, puts it in a letter, a separate letter. It's not actually the resolution, it's a letter. It says, you are hereby notified that the first step is being taken, yada, yada, yada. And that's how that rolls, at least at this stage of the game.
Thank you for the information.
Thank you. Any other questions by board members? Any member of the public have any questions on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to.
Through the
Oh,
chair.
I'm sorry, Director
Yes,
Carbone.
yes, just one question. Do we have all the addresses to past employees? And if we don't, what would we do for, and as far as accounting?
So I can answer that. I think I can answer that. All past employees who are also members of the public retirement system are required to provide contact information to the California retirement system. That's what they provide to the employer. So we do have lists of contact information, but it may be outdated. The law provides that we only have to provide notice to whatever address, the last known address that CalPERS provides to us. That's where we are. So, and it's a new law. So, that we're doing the best that we can with what we understand the rules to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I'll entertain a motion to take the recommended action. Okay. Motion by Gunter, seconded by Morton. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. We'll move now to Community Facility District Special Tax Biennial Fee Study. Looks like Mr. Saeed gets to talk about this.
Chair Parker, members of the board, Happy New Year. With the new year, staff is preparing the capital improvement program. And in doing so, we take into account an aspect that the board set into a resolution in 2012, and that is a requirement to perform a Community Facilities District special fee or special tax fee study every 2 years. This is known as the biennial fee study. This fee study was performed in 2012, 2014, 2017 respectively, and we are beginning to prepare that process again this year. Before you today is contract amendment number 11 with Economic Planning Systems. Economic Planning Systems is the team that has done our biennial fee study in past years. And so the contract amendment before you is really just a continuation of those previous contract amendments, meaning the scope has not changed. This year, however, we have added additional scope onto the contract amendment, and that is for the additional technical support needed for the transition plan. There are little bits and bats that we need to have studied as we move forward. And because of that, we're putting forward a fairly simple recommendation, and that is that you would authorize the executive officer to execute this contract amendment number 11 with Economic Planning Systems to complete the biennial fee study, not to exceed $100,000. I'm available for any questions.
Yeah, just to add a quick comment, Peter mentioned the fact that instead of what would have been something in the $60,000, $75,000 range, we're added some funds to have EPS available to Kendall and Steve Flint, and if they would stand up, you might want to take a peek. These are folks from RGS. I think some of you have already met them in the past. They have agreed, and they're working on a contract which will likely cover the month of January, February, March, April, May through June to provide facilitation services to jurisdictions and the FORA, and we'll be contacting the individual jurisdictions and others. They may need the help of EPS and looking at some of the financial support and data that's necessary to assist the jurisdictions in putting together transition plan implementation agreements. So we had a very positive conversation with Kendall and Steve earlier. I want everybody to know we actually, despite what we've reported to you in the past, found someone willing to take you guys on.
Thank you. Any questions by board members? Director Adams.
I'm the question person today. I did want to ask a question. I just don't understand what this means when it discusses the addition of a task to perform sensitivity analyses and technical support associated with the transition plan. And then looking at page 4 of the document, I think it's task 2. I just, I read it and I'm not quite sure I understand what this is talking about. And is it worth $500,000 or actually now it'd be $600,000?
A sensitivity analysis is more of an engineering term or a technical term. Basically, it asks if you do this, what's the low end? If you do that, what's the high end? And sometimes you have to go through the iterations to be able to determine what may be the best solution. It's called an iterative analysis or a sensitivity analysis. The reason that we're doing that is as decisions are made at various stages of the planning process, we have to look again at what it does to the various variables within the equation. And that analysis allows us to present that information to the administrative committee and then also again to the board for consideration.
So then I'm still confused about one thing then. Is this economic or is this economic?
It's economic. It's kind of like
that why it would be an engineering term. It's an economic analysis.
It's economic analysis. They use an engineering methodology. It's more math. Yeah, I'm getting lost in the weeds here. Sensitivity analysis.
I dragged you down here.
It's asking how sensitive is a variable if we do this or that.
That is clear as it can be. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Director Morton.
It may be clear to Director Adams. So are we asking them to make adjustments, look at an analysis of how we're going to adjust the CFD between now and June 30th, 2020? I'm not sure how this relates to the transition plan implementing agreements. The title in this page 37 says implementation agreements. We really need some clarification. I need some clarification, know what we're paying for.
Well, let me hand that information off to Jonathan. He can talk about some of the specifics in the agreements.
So as part of the transition plan was that the jurisdictions would be negotiating agreements amongst themselves as a follow-up from the transition plan. Those are called transition plan implementing agreements is the current terminology for those agreements. So this scope item is part of that would be looking at FORA's capital improvement program, other FORA obligations. Those might have financial implications for the jurisdictions. Now, depending on what fee structures jurisdictions take on, it could mean a different variables in terms of fee collection. One method might mean you can collect additional fees for certain program elements. Another might be limited of what elements can be funded through a certain fee program. So this would be in support. If it's needed for those negotiations, the technical support can be there for consultant information to be provided on these scenarios before a decision is made. Having the most available information available to jurisdictions will help them in that decision-making process. That's kind of the gist of this scope item.
May I ask a follow-up question? So, in fact, but the document itself talks about the implementation agreements. That's the language used, which is the pre-existing 2001 agreement. So that's part of the confusion that I think I am having. Number two, then, as we go forward, and I just understood you, Jonathan, and I'm repeating it because I'm trying to make sure I understood it, is that the scope of this contract would include services going forward as negotiations commence between the multiple jurisdictions for the transition plan implementing agreements, new contracts between jurisdictions, is that these services, this EPS would be able to provide additional services to answer questions that the jurisdictions may have.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, in fact, it's not a blanket get started doing something, but it's as we go through this negotiation. So, if Marina and the county and Seaside wanted to enter into an agreement, we would be able to ask for a scope of review under this contract that FORA would pay for to give us information. Is that what I'm understanding? Okay, it doesn't say that, so that's
Yes.
why we're all having difficulties.
So when it said transition planning and related implementation, it probably should have said implementing instead of implementation.
Well, implementation agreement is a term of art we've all used in our
We
transition
need, it should
plan.
say implementing.
So
We need to cross off implementation, but implementing. I
That'd
think
be
that's
helpful.
that would, yes. That's right.
And then, could I just make one other comment?
Yes,
I just
Director
wanted
Adams.
to respond. I understand that the $600,000 was for 18 months, not just task 2.
100,000.
It says the full length of the agreement is $497,785. Is that for 18 months? And this is an additional 102 on top of that?
So to address that question about the 100,000, the 100,000 would be for the next 18 months. The 497 is inclusive of the work that they performed for us in the past. So,
Got it.
Right. It's only 100,000.
Just 100. That's,
Right.
I'm very happy to see that. That wasn't clear to me that this was for past work, but thank you very much.
Great. Any? Yeah, it's at the executive committee, I had similar questions, and I thought it was really, I mean, this is a really nice service that is being made available to the jurisdictions to be able to, as we're negotiating with each other, to make sure that we're building in the fee structure that will be needed to achieve the end goals that we have in mind, the costs of those different projects. So, and that means that each jurisdiction doesn't have to kind of hire their own and have the dueling financial analyses. And
Right, and jurisdictions may want to do that anyway on their own, but we thought that it made sense to have EPS available for what Kendall and Steve are going to be doing to try to assist, and to the jurisdictions, because these kind of, what does it mean to me if I take this on kind of question you need to have that answer.
thank you. Yes, Director Garfield, and then we'll come back to Director Adams.
Thank you. Just one quick question. This is not the first time we've run into this being stumped about implementing agreements and implementation agreements. And I'm wondering if the staff or anybody has encountered a better vocabulary that makes it clearer that what's going forward, the transition agreements, something else, because we keep bumping up against this. So I'm wondering if staff might consider a new vocabulary that we could adopt.
Sure, we'll do that, and we might even consult with our facilitators on that question.
You got $100,000 to do it with?
It just seems to come up all the time. So.
Yes, Director Adams, and then Director Morton.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for putting this in and for clarifying. I really didn't get what this was. Now I totally do, and I just want to thank you both very much for this. So that's it for me.
The clarification, once the executive director has said that it's really what's meaning the transition plan implementing agreements. Changing the nomenclature really isn't going to matter because we used it, the distinction of our implementation agreements versus the transition plan implementing agreements as being multiple potential agreements in our transition plan that we approved last month. So I just want to be sure that we now going forward are always talking about our transition plan implementing agreements, and our contracts specifically state that. So that was the point. Yeah. That always to use all 4 words.
Great, good clarifications. I did have just a little question in the tasks. Task 3 is attend other meetings, and the budget for that is $20,000. Seems like a lot of money. And my question is, okay, so we want to budget conservatively and make sure we have enough money. But my question is, can that money move around within the contract if we needed more than $25,000 for task 2, and it looked like we weren't going to need to spend, all that money on attending meetings? Could it?
Well, the answer is on all of our contracts, we'll only spend it if it's according to those rules or if it needs to be spent. And I think we do have some authority within the board's authority that they've given the executive officer to move that around. So if we're not spending it all in one category, we can spend it elsewhere. So this is an up to $100,000 contract. We don't think we need more than $25,000 for the other part. And these additional meetings may require consultations with the city of Marina, Seaside, the county on their projections, land sales revenue. There's a bunch of other meetings that may not be included as the ones we anticipated before a board and with the administrative committee. So I don't think we'll need a whole 20,000 for that, but it might be 15.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? How about the public? Anyone in the public have any comments? Great. Please do.
Levon Stone, Executive Director of the FORA Environmental Justice Network, County Commissioner with the Community Action Commission, which looks out for the welfare of low-income people. I see that Phoenix is not rising here. It's still paying contractors. This is the FORA plan, not the community plan that we started with. So, and we have all these great big beautiful houses all over the place being built like crazy everywhere you look. I don't see anything happening for the people that the ones around this table is supposed to be serving. We're all working very hard for the people that are still here in our community. And of course, our African American community continues to just dwindle away. The gentrification is still going on. The lack of good jobs are still going on. The county will take up the FORA plan, and we will still, how can our country come together? How can our country care about people? We can't even do it locally. We can't even do it statewide. And we're talking about what's happening nationally in the White House. It's all a big wash. It's time for people to care about other people. We're human beings just like you are. You can't be more important than us. You were put in a position to serve the people who need your help. And I don't see that happening. All I see is contractors coming in, paying them how much money we're going to give them. I don't see any talk about what is happening within our community.
Thank you. Any other members of the public with comments on this item? All right, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board for action. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Thank you. Motion by Phillips, second by Adams. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. All right, we'll move now to the election of officers. Mr. Houlemard, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, Chair and members of the board, this is our annual visit to the election of officers for the coming year. This particular election follows on some recommendations that we have from the nominating committee. I want to say a few things first. Typically, during this time, the board looks at its future with respect to electing a chair and a vice chair. That's elected for one term. In the past, as you may recall, some have served for more than 1 year, but typically that's the first of the 2-year term. It is clear also that there are 2 voting FORA board members that would serve as members at large on the FORA executive committee for a year. That's also part of this election. And we have typically elected a past board chair to serve on the executive committee. That last one for purposes of having continuity and with respect to having folks on the executive committee that are both experienced and have background and are new, so that there's rotation. Last year there was a recommendation made that there be more inclusive involvement of members of the board, and as a consequence of that, there's some language that was included last year for the board members to consider in that regard. So, a couple things. The voting procedure for this is if there is a summary nomination, and currently there's a nominating committee report. The chair will ask if there are other nominations at that point after the report is read about the nominating slate. And then if there are other nominations for individual seats, the election will then be by those individual seats. So if there are 6 persons nominated for the 6 positions on the executive committee, that slate holds, then that would be submitted. The board would concur. If there are nominations for rep at large, for example, then there would be an election for that post. If there are nominations for vice chair beyond that nominated, then we go to vice chair. So whichever offices there are nominations for, there would be an election for those seats. Then the full slate would be accepted based upon the election for those seats that may be contested. Is that clear? Okay. The election commissioner for this election is the executive officer, and I really like doing this every year. A majority of votes cast determines the election. This is not by second vote, just to be clear. Council has reviewed eligibility and the voting procedures and will assist where necessary. So, Chair, that's my just brief description. If it's okay with you, I will note to the members of the board that on page 40 of your packet, there is a list of the nominating committee report. It sends forth the following slate for board consideration. Monterey County Supervisor Jane Parker for chair. Salinas Mayor Joe Gunter for vice chair. Marina Council Member Frank O'Connell, past chair. Seaside Council Member John Wizard, and Monterey Council Member Alan Hoffa, member at large, and ex officio member CSUMB President Eduardo Ochoa. So, Chair, if I may, it's up to you to ask if the members of the board would like to seek nominations.
Great, and I would just say that the nominating committee, which was made up of Frank O'Connell, Joe Gunter, Marianne Carbone, and myself, had quite a discussion trying to manage all of the guidance that we've been given. Traditionally, we try to have representation by each of the larger landholding jurisdictions, the county, Seaside, and Marina. Also representation by the 2 smaller landholding jurisdictions, and that's Delray Oaks and Monterey, as well as the past chair that's been mentioned. We also try to have a non-landholding jurisdiction representative on the executive committee, and then someone who is part of the non-voting. The thing that we were really trying to do was to respect that request for rotation. A few years back, some of you will remember, there was a feeling that it was the same old people being cycled through over and over again, and so there was a request that we do something differently along those lines. Also to get some gender representation. So it was, and keep institutional memory. And then the other thing that we were looking at this time too was a real willingness and ability to engage on the issues, because with the transition plan, we're aware that there may be a little more work for the executive committee to do to hash through some things to make recommendations to the full board. So, I would say that we don't have as many new faces on the proposed for the executive committee as maybe I would have liked, and maybe more than some other members of the nominating committee would have liked. To me, we don't have enough gender diversity in this recommendation, but we had a lot of things we were balancing, and this is what we came up with. So we put this before you. I don't know if any of the other members of the nominating committee want to say anything about the process before we check to see. Okay, great. So the question I have for you is, do you want to vote on the slate, or do you have other nominations you would like to make?
I just have a question.
Yes.
If I may. So on the ex officio, the non-voting members, and if the committee already took a look at this question, is, as you stated, that the next year is going to be transition, is that TAMC
was Tamsi asked if they would be willing to serve as the ex officio simply because of their role in the transition. That's my question to the nominating committee.
So I'll take a stab at that to begin with, and then others and the executive officer, if you want to chime in. We did discuss, we looked at all of the non-voting members, and we really tried to examine what the pros and cons were of each's participation, MPC, the school districts, and and TAMC, MST, and I was interested in the role that TAMC might play because they're really kind of at the heart of some of the unresolved issues, and the discussion really focused on the broadest the entity with kind of the relationship with the broadest number of issues, and the majority of the nominating committee felt that CSUMB has they have to interact with the transportation infrastructure, with water issues, with habitat issues, with something else which just left my mind, and economic development, which is not really the purview of the transition plan, but so that was sort of the way that conversation went, and most it was just felt that CSUMB played kind of a central role on a multitude of issues rather than one. So, anybody else want to? Yes.
I was a strong supporter of having the university stay in place due to the fact that they own land and probably have done the most with their piece of property of any of the stakeholders in the entire region, including Marina, Seaside, Monterey County, Delray Oaks, and everyone else. And I felt like maybe they're a leader that we haven't paid enough attention to, and they will continue to grow and make this, because that was one of the deals when FORA closed was education. And I want to say this, the university has stepped up and made it happen, and we need to continue that process.
Good. Any other questions on the process? All right. So, are there any other nominations, or because if not, we can just take the slate?
Yeah, I
Yes.
do. I cannot
Director
support
Phelps.
Supervisor Parker for chair, and so I am nominating Cynthia Garfield for chair. I can speak to it, but I don't even know whether I'll get a second. But I'm nominating Cynthia Garfield for chair.
Okay, thank you. So just to back up, so we will take each seat one by one. We won't go along with the slate. So we will start with chair. We have yes. Okay.
Appoint Supervisor Parker as the chair for the coming year.
Okay, so elections official, how do we do substitute motions?
So you will, depending on if there are more nominations for chair, there will be an election for the post. So the nomination is already in for Supervisor Parker the way I would rule as election. Okay.
And I just heard a question about when the public gets to weigh in, and we're starting to move into the meat of the action here. I'm wondering.
So the public does not nominate, but the public can comment.
Okay. So maybe we should have the public comment, because now the public knows we're going to take this one by one. If there are any comments that the public has on the process or on any of these items, this would be the time for you to make any comments you might have.
I don't know where the public is. I guess I'm considered a public. And it's going to be the same thing anyway. You all going to do what you want to do, and like you said, not that many new faces, and the community itself is just hanging out here, and we get to get up and speak, sit back down. What a boring process.
Anyone else in the public want to comment on this item? Could you speak into the microphone, please? Thank you.
Okay, well, there it is. If you recall, not only does CSU and me occupy property in the county, property in Seaside, property in Marina, they also own buildings over in Seaside, and I believe they own property out in Ryan Ranch. So they cover about they cover quite a bit of jurisdiction, so I don't think anybody should question the president being on the board.
Anyone else in the public with comments? All right, thank you. We will bring it back. So we're working on the chair. So we have Parker and Garfield as candidates for chair. Are there any other nominations for chair? All right, Mr. Elections Officer, how do you want to handle this?
I think it would be best if I handle it. So the way we had anticipated this is also to determine if there are other nominations for other seats, which you indicated you want to take it seat by seat. We can do that, but typically we would see if. Okay. We should ask if there are nominations for other seats. That's the way the elections have always been conducted.
So just a question.
Yes.
So if in fact, example, the person that one wanted as chair is not accepted as chair, then they might be nominated as vice chair.
Right.
But if we do the whole thing at once, we're not going to be able to do that.
I'm sorry if I made this. Let me make it clear. We want to take all the nominations at one point, but then we will do it by office. Each election will be by office. Okay, I'm sorry.
But some,
So, may I speak to this also? The point is that Ms. Garfield or Ms. Parker may not be the chair, so they may be the person that next wants to be nominated for a different position. If we don't know the outcome of that vote, how do we know whether to nominate? Or do we just nominate them for everything?
Excellent point. Procedurally, I think it's better if we conduct this first. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in substitute for the interim chair, I would ask for a roll call vote on the chair, and there are two, excuse me.
Yeah.
The candidate's campaign.
The chair will receive nominations for a given position and allow nominees to make a short statement before calling for a roll call vote. So we will be calling for a roll call vote. Heidi will do the roll call. Before that occurs, each of the candidates is allowed 3 minutes to make a short statement.
All right, Director Garfield.
Thank you, Chair Parker. I would like to say first how strongly I feel that Supervisor Parker is an extraordinarily effective advocate for her positions, and I'm supporting my own nomination for this, but is in no way a reflection on anything I feel about her excellence as a participant here. What I do think we need at this point is a chair that is filled in a totally, maximally facilitative role. I think as we're going through the next year, we're going to have a lot of contentiousness, and I think a neutral facilitative chair will be to everyone's advantage so that their own positions can be advocated for evenly, equitably, and shared among us all. And I think that I think your position would be stronger as an advocate if you're not constrained by the chair's role as the facilitator. And for that reason, I would like to serve the role as a facilitative chair to make sure that each and every voice is well heard and considered. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Chair Parker.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be considered for chair. I'm happy to serve in any way that I can. I do think that my role as a facilitative chair is very appropriate. At this time, I've been, part of the Fort Order Use Authority for a while. And I actually think that the chair position is a good spot for the supervisor that has, as part of my jurisdiction, the vast majority of the Fort Ord lands. I will say too, just as a practical matter, from the perspective of how we try to do the balancing of positions on the executive committee. I was actually hopeful that if there was going to be a nomination where Director Garfield could be considered, because she represents a non-landholding jurisdiction, that would actually be more appropriate for the Salinas mayor and the vice chair position, the way it's lined up. And so I would just I would appreciate to be able to continue in the kind of traditional rotation as it's been going since FORA was established, that the vice chair moves into the chair position, and I look forward to doing as good a job as I can to facilitate these meetings.
So there you have it, members of the board. So in conducting the election, there are the nominating committee has nominated interim chair Parker. We've received a nomination from the board for Cynthia Garfield. I will ask each of you to vote for one or the other as Heidi lists your name.
Are you saying we're limited to just voting yay and nay? We don't have comments? There's comments are not appropriate as we vote?
As your executive officer, I would say you always have the right to have something to say. As the elections commissioner, the idea was that each of the candidates be given an opportunity to present, and then we would do a roll call vote. If the members would like to share, we're open. The floor is open. Please.
No, I don't necessarily have anything to say. I just point of order. I wanted, protocol, because people at
the process we've used,
yes.
Director Oglesby, has been that we would go to roll call vote after the presentation.
Yeah.
Well, since I made the motion, I feel I got to say something, and I think this is an important year for us.
Yep.
Okay.
Either everybody gets to talk or no one, Supervisor. Heidi.
Director Parker. Director O'Connell. Director Morton. Director Phillips. Director Adams. Director Oglesby. Director Wizard. Director Hoffa. Director Clark. Garfield. Director Reimers. Garfield. Director Carbone. Director Garfield. Garfield. And Director Gunter. Garfield. 7-6.
So are there other nominations for other positions on the nominating slate?
I would like to nominate Ian Oglesby to, as executive committee member at large for Seaside.
Is there a second? There's a first and second, so we now have 3 folks nominated for member at large. Are there other nominations? Well,
Point of order, I asked the question then. Does it just have to be limited to, if it's at large, it's at large?
it is.
Or at large.
Are there, seeing no further nominations? Yes, Supervisor Adams.
Thank you. Is it possible for us to get the rationale behind the choices for other positions? You gave a good overview of what the the nominating committee thought when the whole slate was put together, and the question of balance, etc., new faces, that sort of thing. Is it possible then to hear what the nominating committee's rationale was for each of the various positions?
I think Supervisor Parker gave a rationale for those, I think, when she reported what the nominating committee provided earlier. Yes.
Is it appropriate to make a nomination for a member at large, regardless of the location of their jurisdiction?
I believe that's the way the election has to be conducted.
Then I would like to nominate Cynthia Garfield for a member at large position.
Is there a second? Okay.
Do we need then?
Please.
I would like to nominate Alan Hoffa as a member at large.
He's already.
So I was confused about that, though.
So the 2 nominees from
I'm
the
covering
nominating
my
committee
tracks
are Councilmember John Wizard and Councilmember Alan Hoff.
Okay, 4. Thank you. Got it. Thank you.
Are there any other nominations for the board? Okay.
So
And are we? Could I ask a question?
Yes,
Mr.
please.
Elections Officer.
Help me, please.
I don't know if it's going to be helpful. So, are we just taking nominations for the member at large?
This is for any of those.
Any of the positions.
However, I will ask again, based on what we did before, after we finish the election for member at large.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
will have to do it that way.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Wizard.
Thank you. Is there an order of precedent here in the which we vote for first? Do we vote chair, vice chair, past chair, or is it at the discretion of our election officer?
In the past, we've usually had a slate. So this is new. So we'll have to, in order for us to be able to make sure that we haven't missed out on an opportunity for nominations for vice chair or past chair, we would have to wait till after we do the member at large. So the order of the positions that are not filled by summary nominations shall be chair, vice chair, past chair at large, so forth. So there have been no other nominations for vice chair or past chair.
I'd like to make a nomination.
Only for member at large. So
yes, Director Adams.
I'd like to nominate Ian Oglesby for vice chair.
Second.
Through the chair, I won't stand for a vice chair. Remove myself from the vice chair.
are there other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Cynthia Garfield for vice chair.
A second.
I'm going to follow Director Oglesby's lead.
Okay, we'll try another one. I'll nominate John Wizard for vice chair.
Madam Chair and Mr. Election Officer, I respectfully decline.
Okay.
Mary Ann. I'll nominate Mary Ann for vice chair. I'll start down the list.
I'm gonna decline.
You can at least put it on your resume.
But I will tell you, thank you very much.
Okay, one last attempt. Are there other nominations, vice chair or past chair? Okay, seeing none. At the discretion of the elections officer, I will now consider nominations closed. I will now conduct an election for member at large. We have, hold on. We have Seaside Councilmember John Wizard. We have Monterey Councilmember Alan Hoffa. We have Councilwoman Cynthia Garfield. And we have Mayor Ian Oglesby, all as nominations for member at large. So we will go through a roll call after each of those four has an opportunity to present their case for member at large. We will start with Seaside Councilmember John Wizard.
Thank you, Mr. Election Officer. So just to be clear about my second of Supervisor Adams' nomination of my colleague, Mayor Oglesby, I felt it appropriate that one of the largest cities in our county and a city with a lot to lose but more to gain could serve effectively as the vice chair of our executive committee. And by no way was I attempting to pursue any sort of agenda to anyone's detriment. So just want to be clear on that. Specifically about my nomination to be the member at large for a landholding member, I think it'd be a great opportunity to serve at your pleasure as colleagues of yours on this board. And I think it's important that I very specifically identify that Mayor Oglesby and I are a team, and we are together from Seaside wherever we are and whatever we do. And so if it is the will of this board to appoint him as the member at large, then I respect that decision and look forward to continue serving here. Thank you.
Well, I want to first start off by saying I need to thank Supervisor Adams for nominating me for vice chair. Even though we all understand what's going on, but I appreciate you picking me. And so, no, I don't get me wrong. I think I can do it, but I think the concern I had from the start was, as the mayor representing Seaside, I was passed over for the at large. That's the only concern I had with today's issue. And that's it. I'm ready to serve if that's the will of the committee. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate Director Parker, because she did call me to explain to me what was going on. But I just felt, as the mayor, that's the right choice for the group to have made, and to overlook that I took not personal slight, but my community may assume that it was a slight. So that's why I'm fighting for that position. But you guys know I support all of you, and even though we don't agree, so it's nothing personal. It's just that's what should have happened, in my opinion. So thank you so much.
Councilwoman Garfield.
We're going in reverse alphabetical order, aren't we?
You got it.
Thank you. I think you all know that FORA, my commitment to FORA is pretty strong, considering how remote Pacific Grove is to many of these issues. But my commitment is to all of you, as I think all of us are, to a fair and equitable process. I contributed to it. I've worked with many of you on issues that I think put forward a balanced and inclusive perspective. And I would like an opportunity to continue to do that. Thank you.
Councilmember Hoffa.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the nominating committee for considering me. I would just point out a couple things. In the past couple of years, I've been nominated, not as part of the nominating committee, and I declined it. My view of these things is I respect the nominating committee, and I'm going to support the folks that they have recommended. And I would ask you to do the same. As far as what I would bring to the table, I've been here at FORA for, I think, 5 years now. I worked through the 3 years of the transition plan, and I think those of you who've served with me on the transition plan in particular know that I'm somebody who prepares and doesn't come with a preset determination of my position. I represent one of the land use jurisdictions. It's a smaller land use jurisdiction. We have 100 acres, but I'm someone who is very focused on seeing that developed for the betterment of our community. And I think I would point out that the city of Monterey, despite being a land use jurisdiction, has not been represented on the executive committee in a very, very long time. I'm not sure how long. So I would respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you.
So there'll be no comments further. The elections commissioners reviewed what's happened so far. Just to be clear, we've already conducted an election for the post of chair. There is only one nominee for vice chair, only one nominee for past chair. There are 4 nominees for member at large. I'm going to ask each of those that when your name is called to give 2 names. You get to vote for 2 members at large. Authority Council will take notes here, and then I will verify the results.
Director Parker, Director O'Connell, Director Morton, Director Phillips,
Garfield,
Director Adams,
Oglesby and Hoffa.
Director Oglesby, Director Wizard,
That's a good one.
Director Hoffa, Director Clark, Director Reimers,
Garfield and Oglesby.
Director Carbone, Director Garfield,
Oglesby and Garfield.
and Director Gunter.
Do we need Price Waterhouse? As a consequence of the verification of the votes, Oglesby with 9 and Garfield with 7 are the Wizard and Hoffa each have 5. That adds up correctly. Okay. 26, so that's what it should be. So the slate of candidates has all been listed. Chair, to finish the election, we still have to elect the vice chair and the past chair. There's only one nominee in each case. So I would ask the board members if there's any objection to Vice Chair Gunter, past chair O'Connell, please express that. Seeing none, I will.
I nominate Joe Gunter for vice chair.
It's done. It's okay. This is tough already. Okay, so
He talked to me about this before
Right.
we came in. I heard what you said.
finally, the ex officio was CSUMB President Eduardo Ochoa. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the executive committee members for the coming year will be Monterey County Supervisor Jane Parker as chair, Salinas Mayor Joe Gunter as vice chair, Marina Council Member Frank O'Connell, past chair. Member at large is Councilwoman Cynthia Garfield, Mayor Ian Oglesby. An ex officio member is CSUMB President Eduardo Ochoa. The results of the election, I return the meeting back over to you, Chair Parker.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And congratulations.
Yeah.
So is it?
Yes,
Chair?
Director Adams.
I just have a question. I realized that I forgot to ask a question on a consent agenda item. It would be a very quick question. I'm just wondering whether or not it's possible to go back and do that. Okay, I believe it is 7F, and it is the economic development. So he's probably fainting over there as we're calling him up here. I just had a quick question that I wanted to ask about the Monterey Drone Automated, the DART program. And within the discussion, point 5 on page 20, I think it is, indicates that we would convene a workforce development working group to meet immediate and near-term workforce demands. And I just want to be sure that the Workforce Development Board that already exists for Monterey County would be engaged or involved with this process.
Yeah, that's the case. We've had 2 meetings already, and this is in particular regards to the needs for Joby Aviation and their future workforce needs in Marina. So we have tied in all the Workforce Development Board people, all the community college people, CSUMB, and UCSC.
Thank you very much, and thank you for allowing me to take it after it had closed.
Thank you. All right. We are now at the point in the meeting where we ask for general public comment. So if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on any items that were not on today's agenda, this is your opportunity. Seeing no one coming forward. Oh, all right. Oh, good. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mae Green-Smith, and among all of the members that are here, the only question I have as a community person is, being that there's so many experts here, and I've seen different projects developed, how can you, as experts, develop a plan to reach into the community? That would be really a good thing if you would do that.
Thank you. Any other member of the public wishing to comment?
So what I'm concerned about is, where is the community plan in all of this? I want somebody to tell me where it is, because it seems to have developed into a plan, I'll say it again, that is controlled by the people who are members of this board and of the county, but not the rest of us. And I've been here since before this base closed out, and I've been to these meetings over and over again. And the idea that nothing that we bring forward to this group concerning the community, which is doing contracting work without pay and all the other work without pay, is not being taken seriously and is not respected. So when are you going to look at what is really going on in the community and those people who are working very hard to make sure that you have the information going forward that will help you to make some better decisions?
Thank you. Any other member of the public with comments not on today's, about matters not on today's agenda? All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Are there any items from members? Any items you'd like to see put on the agenda? Yes, Director Garfield.
I'd like to revisit one of the issues that you and I had discussed and then wasn't on the agenda, so we couldn't discuss it, is could we on the next agenda have the issues that are still remaining from the transition plan that we feel have not been adequately satisfied.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And before we adjourn, the executive officer has something that he would like to bring to our attention.
Just this is not the greatest thing to have to report at the end of the meeting. I probably will say something after this, but we have had some experiences recently that are a bit untoward at the California Central Coast Veteran Cemetery, and it's been reported to us by the folks that administer the facility that folks have been placing, I would consider to be extraordinarily disrespectful kinds of notes and signs at the cemetery. I'm not going to give those folks the time of day by distributing what it is they've been putting. If anybody's interested, I have copies here if you want to see it. But if you see that kind of thing happening at the cemetery, or if you're because many of us go there just to provide respect, please let the executives there know. Don't take them on or anything, but please let them know, because apparently that's being done during the time that the cemetery is open. Tom Mancini, you know a lot about it. I think we don't want to give them the time of day. So that's my position. So I left it here. It's not on the agenda, but if you want to know what they have been posting to understand why I think it is extraordinarily disrespectful, see me after the meeting.
Great. Thank you. On that one? Yeah.
Does this rise to the level of something where we shouldn't be letting the executives know, we should be calling 911?
I think if you see people that are placing notes and posting things in the columbarium area or defacing some of the...
Defacing is a crime?
And I think it's... understand the enforcement there is California Highway Patrol, because it's a state facility, so that's why I said report it to the folks there. But I think Tom Mancini's already decided he's going to let the Seaside Police Chief know about this. So, yeah, okay. But that's, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Prospero Año Nuevo.